The 24 Hours of Le Mans is quite simply the greatest motorsport endurance event on the planet, and one of the most prestigious races in the world. A testbed for modern automotive technology since the first edition held in 1922. The sweeping curves and the long straight of the Circuit de la Sarthe are also the setting for compelling feats of endurance and bravery by star drivers from all across all classes of motorsport. 1950, the greatest drive ever? There are plenty of fathers out there who don't trust their sons to be competent as far as they could throw them. Louis Rosier was one of said fathers, entering the 1950 running of Le Mans as part of a duo with his son, Jean-Louis. The elder Rosier then proceeded to drive 23 hours and 15 minutes of the race's 24-hour runtime, opting only to take a break in the middle so he could go to the bathroom, change the rocker shaft personally, clean up the mess from said work, and eat. His son got to drive all of 2 laps. But incredibly, Louis won anyway by a full lap in a field that included Juan Manuel Fangio. 1969, the walking start. Driver safety was starting to dominate the conversation in motorsport as the 1960s became the 1970s. And while well-publicized deaths in F1 are now well talked about, Le Mans was also a deeply dangerous race. This came to a head in 1969, when the Porsche 917, far from the race-winning car it was a year later, but just as fast, killed its driver in a crash, prompting new outcries about safety regulations from much of the grid. In protest of a dangerous starting tradition that often saw drivers neglect to do up their safety harnesses properly, British driver Jackie Ickx sabotaged the start of his own race, opting to walk across the pit lane to get to his GT40 when tradition was to run to one's car. As such, he started the race at the back of the grid, but won anyway by a few seconds in what remains the closest finish in Le Mans history. 1970. Porsche's takeover begins. In case you hadn't realized by now, the late 60s and early 70s were a pretty momentous time in the history of both motorsport and road car development. However, it was Porsche, through the iconic 917, that truly revolutionized the game and gave birth to the next generation of race car. In the space of a couple of years, Le Mans went from being dominated by track-going road cars in models like the GT40 to being won by purpose-built race cars with road-going capabilities a mere afterthought. The 917, which stormed to take the brand's first victory, 18 more would follow, in 1970 after a chaotic conception, is the real reason for this. And in turn, is the reason why Le Mans prototypes really exist today. Let's not forget Steve McQueen either, who drove the car to victory in the film Le Mans. 1966, the rise of the GT40. They've made a movie about it for a reason, and the story of Ford versus Ferrari will go down as one of the very few times that endurance and sports car racing managed to capture the attention of the entire world in a more arresting way than Formula One. It all begins with Enzo Ferrari, the founder of the legendary Italian car company and a man who made many enemies during his time in charge of the Prancing Horse. Chief among them was the Ford Motor Company, who actually tried to buy Ferrari in the early 1960s, but incensed Enzo when they refused to continue giving him total control of the company's race team. The two marquises engaged in automotive warfare for much of the rest of the decade. It was at Le Mans where this rivalry took center stage. While Carroll Shelby's own Shelby Cobra initially brought the fight to the Prancing Horse in the war's early years, it was the GT40 that delivered the knockout blow. A revolutionary sports car powered by a muscle-bound V8, the GT40 developed by Shelby, played by Matt Damon, and driven by British racing driver Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, entered the fold in 1966. It brought to an end a 5-year stretch of Ferrari dominance, taking a clean 1-2-3 at the 1966 race, and most importantly, defeating the Italians in a much more competitive affair the next year. The 1980s, speed and sacrifice on the Mulsanne. The Mulsanne Straight, which 51 weekends a year is quite literally a straight 9-kilometer road linking the villages of Mulsanne and Le Mans, isn't the beast that it used to be. Back in the 80s, however, it was one of the last vestiges of pure adrenaline and racing terror left in the world of motorsport. The all-time speed record for the track still stands from 1988, during which a purpose-built and otherwise not all that quick Peugeot WM P88 was clocked at 252 miles per hour on the Mulsanne. Other Group C cars made it a habit of hitting the 249 mile per hour mark as a matter of routine, but it wasn't without cost. Jean-Louis Lafosse and Joe Gartner were both killed instantly after mechanical failures at high speed put them into a wall. 1995. McLaren's triumph. By the mid-90s, Le Mans had become well and truly famous for the prototype cars that we all associate with the race today. They were, even for that time, some of the most technologically advanced cars to ever take to the track, but that didn't mean anything to McLaren, whose race-going version of the F1 road car, then the fastest car in the world, turned up and promptly made mincemeat out of them. 4 of the 5 top places in the race ended up being taken by the F1 GTR, in a display from a car so electrifying it's never been matched, and the only time before or since that a car has been proven so utterly dominant against rivals in a completely separate class. The closest LMGT1 car it was supposed to be competing against, a Nissan Skyline GTR LM entered by Nismo, finished 27 laps behind the winner. So there you have it, guys. We really hope you enjoyed, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.